Hi, this is Jason Hunt, editor-in-chief at SciFi4Me.com, and you're watching Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We're joined today by a fellow creative person, I should say. He has his own show. He has an amazing website, a great collection of interviews, a great collection of articles, and he's also watching a lot more sci-fi stuff than even I'm watching currently, which is amazing to see. We're joined today by editor-in-chief, of course, Jason Hunt, of course, from SciFi4Me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks very much for having me.
For those that don't know anything about SciFi4Me or about yourself, tell us what it's all about.
It started in 2009. The Reader's Digest version is that the Sci-Fi Channel in February of that year decided to change their brand to Sci-Fi, and there was a big hullabaloo online about that. And I thought, well, why couldn't you do another sci-fi channel of some sort and do it online? Do it as something that it wouldn't have to be a cable company. It could just be something online. This is back before all of the stuff with streaming channels and Netflix and that kind of thing. And it started off like any other site does. Usually, it's a blog in the basement. And it was just me and a couple of other people helping me out. And it gradually expanded and grew. We've had a number of different contributors over the years in a rotation as people are able to volunteer their time, and they put in whatever it is they put in, and then they move on. A few years ago, we started on the YouTube side of things doing video. And it's steadily grown. We've got a number of different shows that we have on our video platforms, as well as doing movie and TV and book reviews over on the .com. And we just keep plugging at it.
And here we are today on my show. We have a very similar trajectory when it comes to our process. Although yours is a lot more in depth when it comes to the variety that you have to offer, which I love. What is the most misunderstood aspect about being a sci-fi YouTube channel?
I don't approach our channel as being a YouTube channel, and it's a very fine distinction. But a lot of these YouTube channels are outrage media, clickbait media. We're going to complain, we're going to find the one thing that we want to complain about today and criticize and that kind of thing. And you can make your bones on that for a while. But my approach has always been to treat this as a TV channel that happens to be on YouTube. And so our approach is a little bit different. And I think maybe what's misunderstood more about what we do, because we've got a fixed schedule for our shows. We have a very distinct style for our programming. We have basically news and talk. And our news programs are distinctly news programs, and our talk shows are talk shows, interview shows, and opinion shows. And we keep those very, very separate as much as possible. That makes us different in the YouTube Odyssey Rumble sandbox.
Yeah, I do find that there are a lot of channels out there that specifically cater to the clickbait side of things, but there are some intriguing channels when it comes to actual interviews or actual constructive criticism of shows or different viewpoints of different shows, I should say, as well too.
Sure. And I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying that all of those YouTube channels are like that. There is that group. That's what they do. And I've just never thought that was very sustainable for very long.
Yeah, I mean, how much can you actually complain about something before you beat a dead horse? On
the social media, I haven't found the end in sight yet. So
that is true.
But you're right. There are a number of channels that do bring a good amount of value to the things that they do in terms of critiques and commentary and review and discussion of different things. You have I like it, I don't like it. But then you also have those channels that do analysis of craft, and they pick apart writing and the effects work and editing and style and tone and pace and all of that. So yeah, there's still those nuggets of wisdom and good programs that are out there you can find. Sometimes you have to look for them, but they're out there.
You're going on, well, you're definitely past 10 years. So 12 years now?
13 in March.
Nice. Congratulations. That's a great milestone to have, especially the way technology has evolved, and especially the way internet consumption has evolved when it comes to, shows like yourself and like myself as well too. What has been some of your more popular shows that you've retired but are thinking of bringing back?
We've got a handful that I would like to bring back. I'm not sure popular would be a good way to describe it, because we haven't blown up with the audience yet. We're getting close to 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we're almost at the point where we're going to start to hit critical mass. But as far as a popular, generally all of our shows get some pretty positive feedback. A lot of it where we run into challenges is manpower and resources, because everything's all volunteer here. We don't have a budget for, a paid staff or anything like that. Whoever's available to do things. And as, like I said before, as they rotate in and out, we have various different shows that they can do and some they can't. I would like to bring back about 4 programs that are sitting on hiatus right now. One of them's called TARDIS Sauce, which is a Doctor Who discussion. Trailer Park, which is analysis and breakdown of movie trailers. Podcast that we had for a while called the Rogues Gallery, which concentrated on DC Comics related TV and movies, but we bring it back. It would be an expansion and discussion of comics in general. Nice. And then over on our Twitch channel, I'd like to bring back a show called 8 Bits, which is a discussion of the latest gaming news. So I would like to have those back in the rotation, but a lot of it's going to depend on who's available and how much time we have to do it. What's in your current roster that you're excited about every time a show appears? Right now, we've got about half a dozen shows. We've got the H2O podcast on Monday night, which is myself and Tim Harvey talking about various different topics across the spectrum of various genres, sci-fi, fantasy, horror. And then on weekdays, we have a show called Live from the Bunker, which is an interview talk session. So I have guests for an hour to do an interview conversation. When I don't have guests, I get to rant for an hour. And then we have Good Morning Multiverse on Saturday morning, which is the news wrap-up program. We have a show called Foreign Bodies, which is a discussion of horror that's made outside the U.S. And then we have Salacious Crumbs and Tribble Bites, and those are our Star Wars and Star Trek news programs, respectively. I like to be a little bit clever with our show titles. They're very good. I actually enjoy it. My original show was TGT, which was Two Guys Talking, because I had a co-host back then. And then I evolved into Two Geeks Talking, and luckily I got the URL for that, so that works out. That's always nice, right? I mean, yeah. We had to, when we first got on Instagram, I had to fight to get the SciFi4Me identity, because somebody was using it and it didn't even look anything like they were discussing science fiction. They were Jehovah's Witness posts or something. I'm like, wait, what? So since we had the brand everywhere else, I was able to go to Instagram and say, hey, could we have this, please? Because it doesn't look like anybody's using it. It's always nice when you get those URLs that you can pick up, and instead of doing the search, oh, it's already taken. Doing search, oh, it's already taken. I found it was interesting because about 5 years after I started the show here, someone else put together a Two Geeks Talking with the number 2. Yep. So now every time I promote the show, I have to specify it's the word 2, not the number 2. And it's just like, come on. I was actually surprised that nobody had been using Good Morning Multiverse yet. Because I mean, it's such an obvious thing for a news wrap-up show. Yeah. I do the search before we start any kind of a new program, just to make sure that title's not out there and get, like you said, cause confusion. Nobody's using Good Morning Multiverse. And I thought, that's weird. But of course I pounced on it. I'm sure we're going to do it. It's even more prevalent now, thanks to the whole, Spider-Man films and all that other stuff that occurred. And of course the Marvel megaverse that they put together as well. Oh, too. Yeah. As a longtime geek that I'm going to guess that you are, because yes. I think I can tell from behind you as well too. What was the first genre of any geekdom that you got into that you were like, man, this is for me. I feel at home. When I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 maybe, I had been, growing up as a kid, you always watch the reruns. I mean, there was The Adventures of Superman with George Reeves. But then when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was flipping channels one day and I ran across this image. It was a very striking image. These two men standing in a very colorfully lit corridor. One of them had on a gold shirt, one of them had a blue shirt. And the guy with the blue shirt had pointed ears. And I thought, oh, hang on, what is this? And looked up in the TV guide, is this thing called Star Trek. And I was hooked from the very beginning on that. And I think that's probably one of the earliest memories that I have of getting involved and getting interested in the sci-fi fantasy milieu. I've never really been big on horror, but science fiction and fantasy, more science fiction than fantasy, but I enjoy, Dragon Riders of Pern and that kind of thing. But yeah, Star Trek was one of the first. And then there was Battlestar Galactica. And Star Wars, of course. I was in the theaters in May of 1977. I was there at the very beginning. And it was one of the few films where my entire family went to go see the movie. My mom was not a big movie goer. And I remember we went to see Star Wars. We went to see Superman in the theater. And of course, when Battlestar Galactica came on in 1978, I'd sit and watch it with my dad on Sunday nights. So it was a very fun formative years for me.
Jump to your very first comic convention that you went to as media. What was the first guest that you got to interview that you never thought you would be able to speak to in an interview setting?
Well, we went to Planet Comic-Con the first year that we were around. So 2009, we set everything up. March 23rd is when we officially went live. And then the week after that was Planet Comic-Con here in the Kansas City area. And we got in as media and we recorded interviews with Aaron Gray, Tom Kane, Sarah Douglas, and so various comic book creators. I think Carrie Callan was in that set. Dennis Hopeless, Kevin Mellon before they were big. I don't know that I had anybody that was I don't know that we could get them. I don't think anybody was a surprise, but you're walking around with a camera and you're saying, hey, camera and a microphone saying, hey, can we interview you? Generally, they're a little bit more open to doing that. Now that those events have gotten bigger, it's a little bit more of a challenge because now you got to go through the handlers and all this other mess. But for the smaller shows, it's a lot easier. Nowadays, it'd be something like Smallville Comic-Con down in Hutchinson, Kansas, where you have, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 people. And the celebrities are there and they're a little bit more approachable in those smaller events. But we've interviewed a number of people that I was kind of surprised we'd get to, but some of them were just, yeah, sure, we'll hang out and we'll go and do things. When we were at Worldcon, one of the interviews that we got to do was Alan Dean Foster. It was a weird thing because we didn't interview him at the event space. We interviewed him at the hotel in one of the meeting rooms over there because he was signing some stuff and doing some things. And so we got to sit down and talk with him for a while. And then after the interview was done, we talked further. And then when we all walked back to the event space together and we were still talking and he's still telling a story. So I was like, I'm here with Alan Dean Foster and we're just shooting the breeze. It's kind of a weird, surreal thing. So I have that happen every now and again.
Those are always fun. It's amazing who you connect with, even with a story or getting a story out of an amazing person who's had a long career. Hey, I haven't told this story at all. You're the first person to get this scoop, so to speak. Yeah. Those stories are always interesting.
Well, and I tell everybody that's going to do any kind of interview or if they're going to moderate a panel or a Q&A, there's a couple of things that I tell them. I tell them, one, these are regular people just like you are. They just happen to be more well-known. They're just folks. Two, do your homework, be prepared so that you can roll with wherever the conversation goes, but also you have a way to ask questions that are not the normal, usual, you've been asked this 1,000 times question. Come up with new things for them, because you want the interview to be interesting for them too. So a lot of times, you come up with something that maybe they haven't talked about before. You go back and you look at other interviews and nobody's ever asked you about this. I'm going to. So it keeps it fresh for everybody. And I think that helps with those interviews that potentially could go weird places, but as long as you do your homework and you've got your information in your head, then you can kind of keep it on track.
I've had a few interviews where a similar situation where I never thought I would get to speak to this person, just happened to go up to the table and they happen to be free, and it's like, here you go, here's a quick 5-minute interview type.
Or you have somebody like Manu Intiraymi who says, hey, you guys have a camera. Do you want to do an interview? Come here, we'll do an interview. I was like, oh, okay, sure. Why not?
They have nothing going on. They look bored out of their mind, and maybe you get to brighten their day with a quick interview and a quick couple of questions, and, maybe set their day a little better than it looks like they're having.
Well, the other part of that too is when you get into you get into having conversations with the older actors, the established actors, the people that maybe they don't get as much work anymore, or they've been retired. We got a chance to talk to James Hampton about Hangar 18, for example. The things where a lot of people in the younger crowd may not be familiar with these people, but without their performances and without the work that they did on the shows and the movies that they were in, we wouldn't have any of the stuff that we have now. So, you get to talk to Anne Lockhart, you get to talk to Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray and Sarah Douglas and Margot Kidder and Lee Majors. And it's interesting to see the perspective shift, because things now are not the way they were then, and the kind of reception that they get now. Like you say, the older actors maybe don't get as much attention, but and that goes back to do your homework, keep the conversation interesting, because if you can pull out little nuggets and factoids that people don't know about these people, it's not common knowledge, that gives them something new to talk about. And it makes them more interesting to people who are just discovering their work. It's a mix of things to keep it fresh and interesting, especially for younger people who have the patience of a gnat, and they just 3 seconds and they're on to something else.
Any consumption of media, whether it's art or writing or television, streaming or otherwise, I don't think this generation could even handle waiting for a show a week at a time.
Right. Well, and it's funny, they did a thing, I think it was Star Trek Prodigy, just now did a cliffhanger because they're splitting their season. And so this most recent episode ends with a to be continued. And I saw them posting on social media. There's like, we want to give people a little bit of an idea of what it felt like at the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 1, because back then you had to wait 3 months. What's going to happen? Riker says, Mr. Worf, fire. And it goes, screen goes black and says to be continued. It's like, no, you're not going to end it there. What? And you had to wait. And yeah, you're right. They don't get that these days. You get your 10 episodes and it's done. And there's no hanging on to see what happens next. And, some of that, too, is a change in the landscape of how Hollywood does things. I've got a friend of mine who's a professor of psychology. She studied this for a number of years, something she calls iGen. You have an entire generation of people that are wired into devices. You got your handheld mobile devices and your iPads and your computers and your laptops and whatnot. And they're so plugged into social media and YouTube, and everything is instantly at your fingertips. You can just look it up and it's there, and it's instant gratification. Now, pop. And they don't have any understanding of what it is to wait for something, to look for something, to actually dig for information, because it's all right there, just easy peasy. And I think we're going to have an entire generation of people who are maybe not necessarily handicapped, but are limited in social skills. I think because of that, everything's online and you're not learning how to interact with real people. My generation was the last of that. I'm 51 years old. I was around and we were out playing with the neighbor kids in the streets till sundown, and you go home when you go home when there's no daylight anymore, right? Yeah. And we were feeding the squirrels and we were riding our bikes and we were, playing cowboys and Indians and whatever. And these kids these days don't have any kind of understanding of that. And it shows in how they deal with people because there's a lot less patient, and you've got a lot more incidents of mental illness and depression and all of the things that go with it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that so many people are dialed into devices way too much of their time.
You're right. Human connection is through a screen. Human connection is instant, and human connection can be easily misunderstood or misinterpreted through a series of sentences. And it's not the same as hearing inflection, hearing tone, hearing, a one-on-one conversation at a better rate.
Yeah.
That's why I'm because of the pandemic, that's why I'm missing interactions, human interactions from a convention standpoint as well, too. I miss the fact that you can go to a convention in Toronto or Chicago or wherever and just interact with people. And it feels like the landscape has changed on another level in that way too.
The flip side of that, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the flip side of it is the advantages that you get from having technology like Zoom and Skype and that kind of thing, where you can actually do one-on-one conversations with people pretty much anywhere in the world. Yeah. We've done interviews with people in England and in the Middle East, and we're able to have those conversations. And like you mentioned with the conventions, a lot of them are realizing now that even when they go back to normal, full on-site, in-person everything, that it's smart to have some kind of online streaming component. So you're going to see a lot more of these hybrids where the conventions, even if they have a regular show like normal, like they used to, there's also needs to be a conversation about, okay, what are we doing online? What are we, are we going to stream certain panels? Are we going to have Q&As that we can put on our YouTube channel or whatnot? And we kind of were in the beginning of that with our streaming coverage of Worldcon, because when Worldcon was here in Kansas City in 2015, we came in and we said, okay, we want to broadcast from the show. And they said, do you want to what? Because this is the old gray hair literary crowd, the literary crowd, right? They don't have time to bother with technology. I said, basically what we want to do is we want to come into a space, we want to set up cameras, and we want to broadcast the 5 days that you guys are here in Kansas City. And it took a while for them to really wrap their heads around what it was I was trying to do. So it was kind of like a political convention or a sports event, where you have the anchors in the booth, you got reporters on the ground, we'd be all over and we'd just broadcast the whole thing. Okay. And we got there and we got our space set up. We got the lights and the cameras and everything. And we're broadcasting from Worldcon the entire 5 days. And authors and publicity people would come by and they're like, what are you guys doing? We're broadcasting live on our YouTube channel. You're what? It was this completely mind-blowing thing for them. About 2 days into it, you could see the light kind of ping right on top of them. Thinking, wait, you're live right now? I was like, yeah. Could we come do an interview? And we ended up doing 53 interviews in that span of 5 days. They would come over and we'd stand there and we'd have the cameras. And this is actually live television. It took a while for people to really understand what it was about. And a couple of people were asking us afterwards, is this your new model? Is this the new thing? I was like, I'd love to do this. I'd love to do this from all the different events, any event that would have us come in and do the broadcast. We've done it from Planet Comic Con. We've done it from TopCon out at Topeka. We did it at Smallville in a scaled down version. Planet Comic Con was a real big one, and Worldcon was big. I would love to do that at events on the regular, as we come in. The problem they have is a lot of them don't understand it. Or now that we've had all of this 2 years where everybody is having to do Zoom, everybody thinks that they're an expert and they all know how to do it, which they don't. It's still in its infancy, and I would like to be able to offer up our expertise a little bit more than we've been able to. But again, that goes back to manpower and resources too. So,
I mean, I love that type of model where you have people coming to you instead of you chasing after people. I love the fact that you're able to get great conversations with amazing people as well too.
Well, and what's really fun too is when you're sitting there and you've got your anchors that are there in the booth, you can get people out anywhere in the space, and all they need is their cell phone and a microphone. They grab, they get on Zoom. At Planet Comic Con the last day, we had, I think, 4 or 5 different people out on the floor. And we just kind of went in a circle to everybody. Somebody was over at Artist Alley, and somebody was over in gaming, and somebody was over here in the celebrity row and all of that. And we kind of did this little last wrap up, and it was like, you can't do that in person. You can't do that just with a podcast or just a bunch of articles or whatnot. This is something unique in the space when you have the video component and the broadcast ability. It's an advantage that we can bring to other events. I just wish anybody would understand that we could do that.
That's just about pushing what services you have as a media platform, or rather as a media company.
Well, the thing we run into, I think, more than anything else, because we've had those conversations with people like Reed Pop and Fan Expo. As small as we are, I don't think people see us as a viable alternative to something like SciFi Wire, for example, because Reed Pop had a partnership with them for a while. And there was a specific SciFi Wire stage. So anything that SciFi Wire did with Reed Pop was just that one stage. It wasn't the entire event. And there are other considerations that you have to take into account. You've got contracts for the celebrities. And if they did anything that was part of a broadcast, then that's another piece of an appearance. And that's got to be negotiated into the contract and the fees and all that other stuff. So there's a lot of considerations to take into account there. If you have that, at the very least, if you're open to that kind of a conversation, then you could figure out, okay, well, what can we do live? Because a lot of these conventions are having those conversations. What can we do live online? What can we get away with? What can we afford? Who's willing to do certain things, and what kind of programming can we put on there? Because you have to find that balance between what's available in person and what's available online. Because if everything's online, I don't need to go to the show. You don't want to sabotage your in-person attendance. Mm-hmm. So you got to find that good mix of what you can put online without diminishing the in-person on location event. So it's just stuff that's got to be figured out, and people are still, they're still twisting a little bit, trying to figure that part out.
I was always curious about the technology side of things, the bandwidth side of things when it comes to that. And while you're taking a majority of the bandwidth through cell data and all that other stuff, I mean, after a 5-day span, that's got to eat up a lot of time and money and everything along that line from a show perspective.
If we do a full coverage broadcast like we did at Worldcon, one of the things that I generally ask for is a hard wire to the internet at the facility. And that helps mitigate some of that, because you're right, it does take a lot. We can do it with Wi-Fi hotspots and stuff, but the bandwidth, like you said, is sometimes a challenge. It's a lot easier. It's better. It's a better signal. It's a stronger signal if we've got a hard line connection into the computer that we're using to broadcast. But we have done it with hotspots. It's just not ideal, because you drop your signal, you lose a lot of your video quality and that kind of thing. Your resolution goes down, and sometimes you get splotchy connections. If you've got people dialing in, we did one 1 year. I want to say it was 2017, 2018, Free Comic Book Day. At the same day, we were out for the lightsaber challenge. There was a group here that was putting together, going for the Guinness Book of World Records of the largest lightsaber fight on record. And so we were there, and we were also dialing in people from other parts of the country for Free Comic Book Day, but everything was Wi-Fi, and we had a terrible connection, a lousy broadcast. We couldn't get any signal. So I finally ended up saying, just record something and send it to us. It was frustrating, but it was at that point I was like, okay, Hardline from here on out. We got to have a cable. So.
Technology also has evolved a lot since, first starting the show itself too.
Well, it's funny you say that camera right back there behind me. Mm-hmm. That I have two of those. That is a Panasonic AG-DV100B. And it's an SD camera. It's not even an HD camera. And I use that for a couple of the shows that we do. And it still turns out a decent enough picture. It'll scale up to 720 and it does what it needs to do. But yeah, it's, a lot of people ask, what do you need to get started in all of this? I was like, well, you don't need all of the fancy, you don't need a red. Just use what you've got. We've got webcams, we've got SD cams, we've got all sorts of different things. And you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get started in something like this. A lot of people think that it's there's that threshold of getting the expensive gear. You don't have to have any of that.
Yeah, I mean, just a simple matter of upgrading audio and have a good camera and maybe a decent ring light or something like that, or two, balance out yourself.
This right here, this setup that I've got, this is ambient light in the room. Oh. I don't have any specific special light for me. Now I've got a studio light hanging over me whenever I do Good Morning Multiverse, because I'm back there. This is the setup. It's just, the light in the room, and I don't have anything special set up.
Once you find technology that works, you kind of stick with it until it breaks, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the only way you can save, your sanity and your wallet. Looking at the future of the show itself, looking at the future of what you're trying to accomplish from a professional standpoint here, what's your end goal, though?
On my more ambitious days in the past, I have sat and thought it would be nice to have all of the Sci-Fi Channel's audience, and eventually get to a point where we have the money and the resources where we could start doing original fiction programming, where we could do more shows throughout the day, maybe have a Roku channel or something where we could actually be, something that you can watch on TV and not just on the web. I would like to have more resources on our news operation where we could actually get not necessarily scoops, but get more inside information so we can confirm things, so we can actually make sure that what we're reporting is factual or not, rather than have to rely on everybody else reporting rumors or news or whatnot. I mean, Deadline and Variety and Hollywood Reporter and all of that's fine, but you have these other people like Mikey Sutton, for example, people who have inside sources. You got Giant Freaking Robot, and you've got We Got This Covered, and you've got Grace Randolph, and you got Andy Signor, and you got all these different sites that have sources. And it would be nice to have a few more of those, but also to have those connections and resources to allow us to do more programs and maybe do this full time. And this becomes the job. This becomes the gig. I would like to be able to create jobs with this and pay the people that are on the staff. Right now, that's a little bit more ambitious than I'm able to do, but it's a nice goal to have out there somewhere. I think maybe at the 15-year mark, we'll hit that overnight success moment and we'll be all set.
So what's your creative kryptonite then as a creative person?
Not being able to duplicate myself. There's a lot of the behind the scenes producing side of things that is hard to replicate in terms of the button pushing and the managing of the shows and orchestrating that kind of thing. Hosting a show is easier than producing a show if you don't have that in your background. I've got 33 years in media production, so this all comes relatively second nature to me. But teaching people how to use the tools like OBS or Photoshop or Adobe Premiere or, editing video or producing any of that stuff, I guess you could say that's my kryptonite, because I find it a challenge to get the time to teach other people the skills that they need in order to be able to do this. So I'm not the one doing all of it. That's coming slowly. Every now and again, I'll get these moments where I can teach somebody, okay, let's just concentrate on this one little thing here, and then we'll add to it, and we'll do something else here, and we'll do something else. So it's coming along. I do a whole lot more than I probably should. I need to be able to delegate a little bit more, but that comes with teaching people how to do things.
So is there anything that I haven't touched upon that you'd like to showcase those that are watching and listening to this interview?
I can't think of anything in particular. I mean, this is something that we've talked about, the fact that we do this because we love to do it. I would always, like to have a bigger audience, of course, but the thing about doing this kind of thing, we get plenty of positive feedback. People find our channel, they find our programs, and they appreciate what we're trying to do, staying objective, staying above the drama, and not getting too deep in the muck and the mire and the mudslinging and that kind of thing. We try to be a little bit more mature. We're older for the most part than a lot of these guys that are on YouTube. So I don't know how much that has to do with it, because our approach is different. People notice. We just need more people to notice.
2,000 people on YouTube is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to subscribers. That's a great accomplishment either way. So,
well, thank you.
I'm trying to get to 1,000 myself. So
it's a slog, and especially with YouTube doing the shenanigans that they do. I mean, you at any given point in time, YouTube could yank the rug out from under any channel at all for any reason, for no reason. Mm-hmm. They just arbitrarily just decide we don't like you anymore. We're going to yank your channel, which happens. And we see this in our subscriber count fluctuating. We'll get 3 or 4 or 5 new subscribers, and then it'll go away. 2 of them will go away, and then we get 3 more, and 1 goes away. And it's like, okay, YouTube, what are you doing? I don't think that they're completely objective and honest in how they deal with channels, which is one of the reasons why we've set up, we've got our videos feeding to Rumble. We're also on Odyssey, just basically hedging our bets at this point, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, that YouTube could just decide they don't like how you squinted in that one frame, and they're going to yank your channel.
Or even worse was like about 2016 or whatever, when they decided to yank off all monetization on any channel under a certain amount.
And we had to build back on ours too. Yeah.
Well, that I haven't recovered from that. It's a kick in the balls. I mean, you put all this effort to utilizing a platform to promote yourself, to promote your guests, and to promote your shows. You're just left in the dust like everything else.
Yeah. And it took us a while to recover too. We had an opportunity. We were able to stream from Star Wars Celebration when it was in Chicago in 2019, I think. The Thursday before the show opened, because we've got some connections in the 501st, we were actually able to get into the space before the show opened and record a few interviews. And, we got in there with cell phone, and, we're broadcasting, say, hey, we're down here at C2E2 at Celebration. And during that whole time on Thursday, first day of the show, Star Wars, official Star Wars channel was not streaming yet. And we were the only ones that got any kind of a signal inside the space. Because I know Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers was down there too, and he was running into a problem. He wasn't able to get a signal on the inside of the building. He was outside, But when he was inside McCormick, he couldn't get any kind of a signal. We weren't sure why, what was going on. So we were the only channel that was streaming live from inside Celebration the first day of the event. With that, we got our view count up, we got our subscriber count up, we got our hours, the watched hours and stuff, that we were able to get our partner level monetization back. But without being able to do that at Celebration, I don't know how long it would have taken us.
That's great fortune, truly. And, he showcased, I'm sure, an amazing celebration at that too.
Yeah, it was fun, but it was a slog. It was one of those things. We need our monetization back. Now I got to fight for that too, as well as, all of this other stuff that we got to do. YouTube is arbitrary, and they'll change the rules at the drop of a hat, and they won't really give you much kind of a warning, and you got to learn how to roll with it. Toss your hands up and say, I'm done.
At what point are we good enough?
I think we're always good enough. That's a subjective value judgment for the audience to make. As long as people continue to show up for the kind of material that we put out, we're good enough. And you run into the, perfect being the enemy of good if you wait until you have all of your ducks in a row and everything is perfect. That can take away from your opportunities to do something when you're just good. And, good enough is the best effort that we can make, as honest and as respectful of the audience as we can be. And they'll either respond to that and they'll keep coming back for what we do, or they won't. I have built into our process what I call abort or pivot points. We have moments of measurement where we come in and say, okay, how well is this particular effort doing? Whether it's a show or a segment and that kind of thing. And if it's not doing well, okay, do we need to adjust? Do we need to make some adjustments, or do we need to just stop doing this and do something else? And so that gives us time to sit there and say, is this good enough for the audience? Because if the audience is responding, then it's good enough and we keep going. Do we need to do it better? Do we tweak it a little bit and whatnot? And we rely on the view counts and comments and the likes and the shares and all of that to get an idea of just how well it's being received.
What is an early experience where you learned that language had power?
When I was in high school, we had a Bible class in my youth group. My youth minister sat, and we were starting the quarter. And he said, I want everybody to go through and introduce yourselves, tell us your name, and then tell us what you prefer to be called. And then, like nicknames or, pet names or whatever. This is back, 30 years ago. This is back before pronouns and Z and Zer and all that stuff. But it was, do you prefer, because some people go by their middle name. Something in that moment gave me a little bit of an insight that if you are respecting somebody and you have that power of language to acknowledge somebody, it's just in a name, but it also kind of translates into everything else. Words have meaning. The ability to communicate with people and the ability to very clearly articulate your thought, because in this day and age, social media, nobody knows when anybody's being sarcastic. So you have to be very careful in the word choices that you make. And as a writer, the various different stories that I've written and short stories, novels, and screenplays that I've written, language comes into play with that too, because you have to make sure that the words that you're choosing convey the particular ideas that you want to get across. And so for me, language has always been an important aspect of not just getting along with people, but making your point, creating whatever content that you create, all of those different things, the words that you use, and the way you present yourself always makes a difference in how people receive that.
Everyone has one person that inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
The first person that comes to mind is Dr. Nancy Myers. She was an English teacher in high school. And between her and my sixth grade reading teacher, Debbie Wright, they both encouraged my writing craft, the ability to actually put words to paper and tell stories and do something creative with what I had. And between the two of them, I think probably the most influence, the most encouragement that I had early on, that made me think, well, yeah, maybe I could actually do this and be good at it, because there's a risk that you run being creative, where you basically put yourself out there, heart and soul. You put yourself into this project, and it's your baby. And if people don't like your baby and they sit there and they say your baby is ugly, it's a blow to the ego. And depending on how resilient you are, that can make or break a creative career at the very beginning before it ever has a chance to start and flourish. So it's really important that you find those people who can encourage you, but do it in an honest way and give feedback that's, helpful and constructive to make what the thing you want to do better. And that honest feedback at the same time you're getting encouragement, I think is a good mix, but it's very hard to find.
From a professional standpoint, you've had a career in media for many years. You've also created an amazing site with, of course, SciFi4Me, and you have created many shows with many different people over the decades, I'm going to say. So from a professional standpoint, you are successful. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
Personally successful, yes, but not because of anything professionally that I've done. That's a factor that figures into things, but my sense of personal success comes from a couple of things. One is that I've got a son that I've raised, and he's relatively responsible and smart and can take care of himself, and he shows respect to his elders and such. I've married someone who is encouraging and supportive. And that personal success comes from a sense of knowing my place, knowing my sense of self, and being satisfied and content with where I am in life, not necessarily with regard to career, because careers change, jobs change, and job situations change. And if your happiness depends on your job, then it's a little bit more vulnerable. So you need to have a good sense of yourself and have that as a priority more than anything else, because that gives you a stronger sense of satisfaction with everything that you do, I think.
The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Failure comes at a price, but recognizing the price is one of those things where, that comes with a certain amount of maturity. When you get handed a setback, it's not necessarily a failure every time. It's an opportunity to learn. Okay, what did I do wrong? What needs to be done better? What needs to be done differently? If there's a situation you didn't handle as well as you could have, various different things, failure on a personal level or failure on a professional level, there's usually a reason for it. And some of it's something that you can control, and some of it's beyond your control. And you have to learn how to recognize the difference between the two. And those things that are within your sphere of influence, you figure out the best way to handle those things. And some of that is attitude. Some of that is preparation. Some of that is the ability to adjust on the fly and to roll with whatever punches are thrown your way. You have to figure out, this pandemic has been a good example of that, where everybody has to learn how to do things differently. Everybody's got to learn to adjust. And we're still adjusting. We're still learning how to improvise and figure things out on the fly. And for me, failure comes when you quit, when you give up. Past that point, if you continue to push at something, you continue to make an effort, you continue to strive, you're not necessarily failing so much. Now, something might not work, but it's just another point of information that you can use to make an adjustment to make the next thing work better.
The younger generation is looking at your work and they're becoming inspired to be creative in their own way, whether it's to, just do interviews in a creative setting, whether it's to do a show of their own making about a fandom that they enjoy, or whether it's to be creative in another avenue whatsoever. And you also have the younger generation with you as well, that might be creative in their own way, some way, shape, or form. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Inspiring people is a tough thing, because if you set out with that as your goal, I want to inspire people, it takes your focus off what you actually need to be doing. I think, especially with the younger groups, I think there's too much emphasis that's been placed on notoriety and influence and ego and that sort of thing. Nobody appreciates hard work, because influencing people comes from being able to get something done and being out in front of people. And whether it's a sports star or a Hollywood star or a successful business person or whatnot, the successful people are the ones who work hard, the ones who strive to achieve something. And younger people don't quite appreciate how much work is involved in success. So when you sit there and say, "Oh, I want to inspire somebody," that's almost akin to saying, "I want to take a shortcut. I want to be famous and popular so I can influence people." And that's to me, that's the wrong goal to have. I want to accomplish something. I want to achieve something that the audience will appreciate. But I want to provide something that is high quality, that is professionally done. I guess you could say something that lasts, something that stands the test of time. Is not just some flash in the pan thing. And people will appreciate the work that you get, that you put into a product or a service. And it's not about the notoriety. It's not about the fame, because that puts your focus on the wrong thing, and you lose track of the steps, the step by step that you've got to take in order to achieve the success that you want. Success comes after you make the effort. And that's not something you sit there and say, "Well, I want to inspire somebody by work." And people don't want to hear that.
And, you learn things and you experience things that you would never get if you take a shortcut.
You do. And the other part of it too is, younger people need to be open to learning from the mistakes of others. There are some conversations that I've had with some people, and they want to go through it all themselves. They want to do it all themselves. They want to be on their own and not have to rely on anybody. I keep saying, you need to be willing to listen to the people who have already been there. There are people out there who have life experiences that the younger crowd hasn't had. Rather than make you go through these terrible, awful, no good experiences yourself, you should be willing to listen to those people who have already gone through them, so you can learn from other people's mistakes and not do the same things that other people have done that turned out to be the wrong thing to do.
What's that phrase? Do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah. Like yeah. I know, but these young kids, the late teens and early 20s, they think they've got it all figured out and they know everything, and they don't want to listen. And it's like, okay, you're going to learn things the hard way. If you listen, it might not be so hard, but eventually they come around and they figure out that you actually know what you're talking about. But it's somewhat painful in the meantime.
Well, Jason, I do hate to say this, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's greatly appreciated.
Sure, I appreciate being able to come on and talk.
Before I let you go, though, where can we find you? How can we support you on the internet?
The main site is SciFi4Me.com. That's with a number 4. We're also on a number of video platforms. We're on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey for video. And then for social media, we're on pretty much everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We've got a company page on LinkedIn. And then we're on the alternate socials: MeWe, Minds, Gab, Parler, Getter, Locals. We've got a Discord that we're setting up. We haven't really quite got that all up and running yet. And it's basically just kind of spread things out. Don't put all our eggs in one basket type of thing. And, we've got a Pinterest account for cosplay related material. So any place really except Tumblr and TikTok and we're not on the really younger people's socials yet. And we do have a newsletter that you can sign up for over at .com. So there's that too.
Well, like I said, I hate to say it, but that then ends this particular episode on Two Geeks Talking. Again, Jason, thanks for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it. You can, of course, find this interview and 1,000 others, 1,000 plus others, I should say, on our website, twogeekstalking.com or tgtmedia.com. And it's twogeekstalking.com is the word 2, not the number 2. You can, of course, find this interview on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/TGTmedia. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening, watching on Two Geeks Talking.